Okay, what I want us to do is to look at chapter 3. And pages 24 to 26. And we're looking at Serena Joy's introduction. And we're going to focus on a few things. We'll focus on, obviously, what we learn about her. I also want us to look at the power relationship, how she sets up a power dynamic between her and Offred, and also how the themes that we've seen in chapters 1 and 2 are further explored and further developed. Okay, so let's begin at the top of page 24. She waited until the car started and pulled away. I wasn't looking at her face, but at the part of her I could see with my head lowered. The blue waist thickened, her left hand on the ivory head of her cane, the large diamonds on the ring finger, which must once have been fine and was still finely kept. The fingernail at the end of the knuckly finger filed to a gentle curving point. It was like an ironic smile on that finger, like something mocking her. So there are a few things we can pick up on here in this introduction. So things like the fact that her head is lowered. What does that suggest? Well, it suggests that she's not allowed to look at the face of Serena Joy. This immediately sets up a power relationship between the two, because Atwood's not allowed to look up at Serena Joy's face. She has to keep her head lowered, which shows maybe a sign of respect, but also a sign of fear. So there's that power, that sense of power there is all immediately set up at the beginning of that passage. We then move on to talk a little. She then moves on to talk a little bit about how Serena Joy looks. Things like the thickened blue waist, the ivory head of the cane, the knuckly finger. So there's a sense here of age. That Serena Joy is old and infirm, or older. And there's a sense here of bitterness, I think, that we definitely get a sense with Serena Joy that she feels bitter at her age and position. Although she has the diamonds and she has the wealth and she has the status, in many ways she has less because she has no ability to have children. Of course, the irony is that we see later in the novel, the irony is that actually it seems that it's the commanders who are the ones that have the problems, not the women. But as far as Serena Joy is concerned, she has, although she has high status over Offred, the fact that she can't have children means that within herself she sees herself as being fairly low status. But it's the bit at the end of this paragraph which I think is important, and the idea of the nail being like an ironic smile, and that it seems to be mocking her. I think this refers to the links to the nail as a symbol or an icon of femininity. That the nail itself reminds her of the past, of seductiveness and physical attraction. So the fact that she has this nail on her finger, this sort of filed, the point of the nail here, it seems to be kind of smiling ironically at her, that it somehow reminds her of the past. And in doing so, it's continually reminding her of what has passed and what is no more. And then she goes on, you may as well come in, shut the door behind you. So there are those commands, immediately there are those commands over Offred. Aunt Lydia then says, a little bit further down the page, Aunt Lydia said it was best not to speak unless they ask you a direct question. So that idea of don't speak only when spoken to, that's like a child. It's the child that would have had that command issued, Don't speak unless you're spoken to. Make sure that you're seen and you're not heard. But then what's quite interesting is Aunt Lydia goes on to say, try to think of it from their point of view. It isn't easy for them. Well, what's not easy for them? Well, she's talking about the wives. Why isn't it easy? Surely they've got an easy life, haven't they? Well, I think this is what makes The Handmaid's Tale a very interesting novel, because in many respects, Atwood refuses to judge any character. She refuses to make us feel particularly strongly about any character. She gives us in many ways a very balanced point of view, that it's just as difficult, Atwood seems to be saying, for the wives as it is for the handmaids. That the handmaids seem to be the ones that have the worst deal, but actually the humiliation that the wives must feel at having another woman coming in to the house must be pretty extreme. Remember, but this stage in the novel, we don't know this, because we don't know why Offred is there. We don't really know what role she will have in the household. All we know is that clearly it's a difficult arrangement, but it's a difficult arrangement for the wives, as well as it is obviously a difficult arrangement for the handmaids, because in the previous chapter we've already realised that many of the handmaids have attempted suicide in their position. So then, going on down, the commander's wife sits. Offred stands with her hands folded. Serena Joy smokes a cigarette, which Offred looks at with longing, because cigarettes are forbidden. That suggests that that if there is a sense of that status brings the ability to break the rules, that actually cigarettes are forbidden in this society, and yet Serena Joy has them. So Serena Joy is able to break the rules because of her status. And there's a comment being made there on rules themselves, isn't there? Who are they for? Who are the rules for? Are they for everyone? Are they for just those people who need to be controlled? And if that's the case, then if you don't need to be controlled, then you don't need the rules. And then at the bottom of page 24 and to page 25, she says, this is your second, isn't it? Second what? Well, we don't know. I think because we're talking about old What's-His-Face, clearly there's been another man involved. So this is the third man that Offred has had dealings with. Top of page 25, she goes on to say, not so good for you either. Why is that? Well, clearly there's something at stake here for Offred. There's some. The reason that Offred is here with Serena Joy and with the commander is because she has something that she needs to do. She has a role to fulfill, but inherent within that role is a sense of obligation that she needs to do something, and if she doesn't do it, then there will be a problem for her. So there's a real sense of pressure here on Offred to deliver. Again, we don't know what that thing is, and we won't know until slightly later in the book. And then she lets her sit on the edge of one of the stiff back chairs. She doesn't stare around the room. Sight, again, if we look at the top of page 25, sight is something that we see time and again in the novel. It's a key theme of the sight. What we are allowed to see, what we're not allowed to see, what is limited from us, what we have to see, so on and so forth. That sight becomes something that is almost a luxury. That at this stage in the novel, this stage in her relationship with Serena Joy, she's not allowing herself the luxury to see these things. Then we get the middle of page 25, a fairly long description of Serena Joy. We've got the plucked eyebrows into a permanent look of surprise. There's that the sight again. We go further down, we've got the blue eyes, not her eyes, which were the flat, hostile blue of a midsummer sky and bright sunlight, again linking into sight and seeing. A blue that shuts you out. It's interesting. We see the eyes as kind of the windows to the soul, and this is something which is a theme in the book. Seeing through the eyes and understanding, and not looking. By not looking at someone, you're unable to make a connection. And when later in the book Nick stares at her and winks at her, she sees this as being quite offensive, because for a man to stare at her and to look her in the eyes is deemed offensive in this society. So in Serena Joy's eyes here, there's no way into them, that somehow they're locked, probably as much as anything. It's a defence mechanism. Because like everyone, Serena Joy has had to learn to cope in this society. And then further down the page towards the bottom, Serena Joy says this: as far as I'm concerned, this is like a business transaction. Again, we don't know what the this is. We've not been told what the this is between them. But as far as Serena Joy is concerned, this is not something which is there's nothing personal. There's nothing emotional. It's a completely cold. Whatever's going to happen, it's going to be a cold act. And this word transaction here, something which passes from one person to another. And then over the page, onto page 26. About a third of the way down the page, she says, as for my husband, he's just that. My husband, I want that to be perfectly clear. Till death do us part. It's final. And then it's one of the things we fought for. Well, what does she mean, one of the things they fought for? Well, clearly something has happened in the past. They fought for something. They fought for the right. And I think here it's the right to marriage. And it's the right for the permanence of that act. Perhaps as a comment to how easy it is nowadays to get divorced. Clearly this society, this dystopian society of Gilead, is one where marriage is final. You cannot get divorced. Till death us do part, she says. It's final. But of course, to make a marriage, a traditional marriage in the Christian sense, to make a traditional Christian marriage viable, you have to have children. And they can't have children. And so one of the problems that Serena Joy has here is that she's caught within a society which expects a certain way of being, a certain way of acting, and yet the idea of childbirth is something that is impossible. And then of course we learn as the novel progresses that that's the role of the handmaid. The role of the handmaid is to be a proxy, a child bearer for the wives and the commanders. And then just a little bit further up, we get just above her talking about one of the things they fought for. She probably longed to slap my face. They can hit us. There's scriptural precedent, but not with any implement, only with their hands. That within the scripture it says that the wives can hit the wives that can hit the handmaids. So there's the fact that it's in many ways state-sponsored violence. That this is violence which has been sanctioned by the state to control. So in the way that we've had things banned, like the cigarettes, which is a form of control, also we have violence, which is a form of control. And there's a clear parallel here with many of the dictatorships we've seen in the last 100 years or so. And these dictatorships have used violence as part of the machinery, as part of the way in which those in power control those underneath them. And then at the end of the passage, we've got this sudden realization that Offred has, that she recognizes Serena Joy, and she recognizes her from the television Sunday mornings, and it was one of the women was called Serena Joy, and it was the lead soprano in Growing Souls Gospel Hour. She was blonde, petite, a snub nose and huge blue eyes, could smile and cry at the same time. It was after that she went on to other things. So she says at the end of this paragraph, the woman sitting in front of me was Serena Joy, or had been once, so that it was worse than I thought. Why is it worse? Because probably Serena Joy has lost more. Maybe lost more than others. to be a figure, to be a famous figure, to be a figure of femininity, a figure of devotion, an icon of the church. Suddenly she's a washed out, crippled woman who can't have children. So there's going to be, the more she has, the more she's lost, the more bitter she'll be. So we'll pause there. There's quite a lot to be going on with, but the main things, just to recap, if we just go back to the beginning here, the main things to recap are the idea of the power relationship which is set up between Serena Joy right from the very, very beginning through sight. The fact that in many ways Serena Joy is mocked by her past, and the sense of what the nail engenders in physical attraction. The relationship, again, power relationship was set up with these commands. The fact that by having status you're able to break the rules. We'll see that quite a lot as the novel progresses, linking into rules and who they're for. The repetition of sight there, where what you are and are not allowed to see. The business transaction between the two of them, the fact that the necessity of children to kind of seal the importance of marriage. And then finally, the idea that Offred realises she's maybe in a worse position than she thought she might be, because Serena Joy is someone who has lost a tremendous amount.